Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted, and I appreciate it. I also love it if you leave comments, questions about the video, constructive criticism, ideas for videos, how you do things. Those are all good things to leave in the comment section. So today's project is going to be a simple cuff bracelet. I have some of that thick triangle wire number 2 that I buy occasionally, and I wanted to make a big solid mount for a pretty marquee amethyst that I have. And so I'm going to use some of that thick triangle wire to make a nice simple cuff with a space carved out of it for a nice marquee prong set faceted stone. So we'll see how this turns out. I'm hoping that it turns out nice. Before we get started, though, I wanted to thank some groups of people. My patrons over on Patreon are a wonderful group of people, and they are my primary supporters. And I wanted to welcome someone new. Michael D is our newest patron. Thanks for signing up. I appreciate your support. And I think that you'll find it's a super nice group of people over there with a lot of knowledge. So, get to know them and tap into that. That's a good resource. Thank you all to my previous patrons as well. You've been great supporters, and I really enjoy your company, so thanks for being part of my community. The other group of people is my YouTube subscribers, and I believe we just passed 14,500, so we're getting close to 15,000, which is amazing. Thanks for that, and I do appreciate the nice comments that you leave. It's super nice to know when people are getting something out of these. It feels like I'm doing something good and not just something financial. So thank you for that. I appreciate that kind of input. I also do appreciate the financial side too, though. The buy me a coffees and the super thanks really help with the cost of materials. So thanks for that as well. All right, with those things being said, let's get started on this project. So this is one of my design idea notebooks that you can get on my merch store. Recent ones, I've started putting conversion charts on the back of them. This one has fractions of an inch to decimals to millimeters. I find that pretty useful. There's another one that has American wire gauge to millimeters, and if you're overseas, that might be handy for you in case I forget to say what the millimeter measurements are. I find these really useful for sketching up my ideas in advance, and I'm not terribly good at freehand drawing, so having these little dot squares in the background helps me to keep things sort of proportional, and I find that handy. So here's what I'm going to do today, and I'm going to take a piece of this thick triangle wire and make it into a bracelet shape like that, and then I'm going to saw out a piece out of it right there, and then I have this pretty purple marquee, if I can figure out where I put it. It's got kind of a partial checkerboard pattern on the girdle facets there, as well as on the bottom, so it has a different look than some marquees, and I kind of like that. So we're going to go with that one. It's about 7.5 millimeters by 16-ish, somewhere in that range. And so we're going to mount that up here. I'm going to use some 16 gauge square, I think. You could use 14 or 16 probably, and create a setting, kind of V's at either end like that. And I think it's not going to be a terribly complex piece, but one of the things we've got to think about is a lot of times you want to do things while they're flat. And this one, because of the nature of a cuff bracelet, how it flexes back and forth, I'm going to try and get it bent into shape as much as I can. I may even reinforce underneath where I cut this out so it's not quite so thin there. But I do want this sitting down low, so we'll see. Maybe I just won't cut it quite as deep. But either way, I want to make sure that this top part doesn't bend too much as it flexes, as it's being put on and off, because that'll mess with the setting. So we want to keep that in mind when we're designing this. This may or may not work, I'm not sure, but I guess we'll find out. So first off, we got to cut a piece of this wire, and I chose to make it about somewhere between 5 3/4 of an inch and 6 inches. That's usually a good range for kind of a medium-sized bracelet for a cuff, and that equates to about 14.5 to 15.5 centimeters. So 15.3, I think, is what I put. But this stuff is about 6.5 millimeters wide, and it's pretty heavy and thick. And I measured out the amount that I wanted here, so we just need to go cut this off. You can actually kind of cut this part of the way with wire cutters and then bend it to break it off, but I'm just going to saw it this time, so let's go saw this off. Looks like I need to maybe make myself a new bench pin. It's getting a little beat up looking. I'm using I think it's a 0. You could use a much more aggressive blade if you wanted to. Alright, let's go clean that up. Okay, so I think let's file that flat. You can use your miter vise jig if you want to for stuff like this. It works pretty well. It's probably good enough. So I'm going to spend a little time making sure this is sitting kind of flat to start with. You're bending thick stuff like this, it helps to have something with some lined jaws in it so you don't scratch it up too much. I think it'd be easiest to find the center while it's still flat, and so let's do that, and then we can kind of figure out how wide we want to make this notch. But I think before we cut the notch, let's shape it into a kind of a cuff shape, but let's at least mark it out first. So 154 millimeters, so half of 154 would be 77, I believe. Let's see if that's about right. Okay, so there's 70, 2, so right about right there. Let's see if it's the same length from here to there. Pretty close. Okay, so that's about the center. Good thing I can do those lightning-like mathematics in my head. Alright, so when I'm looking at this, like I said, this is about 16 millimeters long. And I think, you know, if we center that, I'm going to go just slightly outside of where the end comes to, and then let's measure that and then measure out the same length over here, and then we can kind of decide how we want to cut this piece out. I don't want to get it too narrow on the bottom, and so I think I'm going to use my little calipers to kind of make a given distance from the bottom and scratch that along there. That's not enough. That's probably pretty good. So I think if we cut it pretty square, straight up and down, like that. I'm thinking since we're going to bend it like this, that's going to slope it a little bit, and then we can use the file to kind of slope it to match with the prongs that are going to come up at a slight angle like that. That's my thinking anyway. We'll see if it turns out that way. Okay, so let's bend this into shape, and we'll see. This is a bracelet mandrel. You can use an aluminum baseball bat or something like that to kind of shape these things if you want to. Normally I would polish this before I shaped it, but I think today I want to get it pretty close to the size and shape I want it to be. That's pretty close. So I think what I'm going to do is, let's go over to the sawing area. I'm going to saw this part out here like that, and then we'll see how things look. So I'm going to take the file and try and get that all nice and symmetrical. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I cleaned that up with the file and then used my Dremel to kind of smooth it out. I also kind of angled this side and this side. Just sloped it outwards a little bit. And it's still thick enough to where I think it'll maintain most of its integrity. Before we go any further though, I decided I wanted to flatten these ends like I was talking about. So I marked them in about 1 centimeter. And I'm just going to try and use my little bench block here. I'm just going to use my chasing hammer and try not to hit my thumb. So I think our next step is going to be to find the center of this slot. And then we'll line this up. Well, I guess we could just do it like this. Let's do this. Now, see if we can kind of hold it in place. 16, so that's about the center right there. So we need to make a slot that's about 9 millimeters, and so that means 4.5 to either side of that. About there. So I basically need a marquee shaped slot. So about like that. So we're going to have to drill a hole through that, and then we'll just try and saw that out. We may have to do some tapering of it to get it to sit in there nicely, so we'll use a diamond burr probably to shape it a little bit. Come a little bit too far to one side though. Okay, so I'm going to drill that and then we'll saw that out. That's marquee shaped. We can clean it up with the tools now, the diamond burrs. So I've got these various shapes of diamond burr, kind of diamond coated tip burrs. And I think to start with, let's use kind of a skinny, straight up and down one to kind of get it all smoothed out. See what I mean by skinny and straight up and down? Technical terminology. Get something a little bit wider to get this smoothed out, so I'm getting a little bit of a groove there. Okay, I'm going to spend a little time getting it cleaned up now. So my original plan was going to be to do little V's on either side, but I think I'm going to change plans a little bit. The placement where I want the prongs to go needs to be kind of partially inwards. I don't want to mount it outside of this little slot that we've created here. So I'm going to need to mount it in 4 spots. And to do that, I'm going to do a little trick where I solder this together like this. This is 16 gauge square. I cut it a little bit so it's a little bit longer than the width here. Maybe 2 centimeters longer. And I'm going to solder them together in the middle. If you've never been to my channel, I use hard silver sheet solder for almost everything. And I use a liquid flux that I dribble on or spray on, depending upon the situation. And so, I'm going to cut a little bit of solder. So I got one of them too hot and the other one not hot enough, and so it just slowed onto one. So I need to heat a little bit more on this side too. There we go. Alright, so where's my little stone? Uh-oh. There you are. So I think I'm going to use this as kind of a gauge for where I bend these. Go right there. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut these a little bit shorter, but then we'll mount them so they're right attached to those 4 spots there. And like I said, they don't need to be near this long, so let's cut them a little bit shorter. So I got to get these pointing inwards just a little bit, it looks like. We're on the right track here. Need to get it a little bit tighter though. As long as I don't bump it, I'll be alright. It's too much. That's pretty good. So I have a bunch of solder here that I just cut. If you've never seen pick soldering done, it's a really useful technique where you can place solder really precisely. So I'm going to use this to place some solder here. Now, the big problem with this is that this band down here is huge compared to this, so there's a lot more mass in that. And in order to get these two to solder together nicely, we need to get this up to 1450 degrees and this up to 1450 degrees. And because there's so much more mass in this, it's going to take a lot longer to get that. So most of the heat I'm going to be focusing on that. And then at the very end, I'll move some solder right in there. So if you're interested in learning how to pick solder, I'll put a link right up there for you. It's a good technique to learn, I think. It's really important to get both pieces up to that soldering temperature. Otherwise, it looks like the solder sticks to both of them, but it sometimes just sticks to the smaller piece. cool this off. This is pretty good. Okay, so what we're going to do then, I'm going to cut it on either side of that solder joint right here. So we've got that. Once I get those kind of opened up and cleaned up everywhere, we should be able to just kind of mount that like that. And I think that'll be pretty. It looks like this side's a little bit bigger gap than this side, so I'll have to clean this up by moving that angle over just a tiny bit, not much. And then I think we'll be done, but for now I'm going to pickle it, and then we will get it all polished up, and then we'll set the stone. So I think that's going to be pretty. So after cleaning it up and polishing it, I went ahead and right there and there on all four of these, I cut a little notch on the inside with one of those diamond burrs, and then I've been gradually moving these prongs down over it, and as they start to bump into each other, I'm going to snip a little bit more off so that I can push them down further. Be a little careful with a marquee because it tips. This one is kind of a blunt one, so it's not too bad. But if you put too much pressure on the tip of one of those, you break them right off. So I'm just gradually removing material until I get it down where I can lay it down pretty good. And then generally I snip them off about midway up those facets between the girdle and the table facet. Just going to use the flat side of this to kind of push those down tighter. That's kind of what I was shooting for. See, whoops. See, basically the same idea. Got a nice little, doesn't really fit me, but you want to make sure when you bend this, you don't bend it, you know, try not to let it bend right in there. I may go back and reinforce this a little bit. If I do, I'll pop that stone out and add some reinforcement there just to make sure it doesn't flex there. But what I would do if I was, when I was selling this to someone, is I would make sure to get this opening just the right size for them. So that they can just barely slip it on and then turn it sideways like that. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up the rest of the way for pictures, and then we'll get some good pictures and put them at the end. So. Alright, well that was the Marquee Amethyst triangle wire bracelet. I hope you enjoyed that one. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. That helps out a lot. And I'd love it if you take a moment and visit my main YouTube page. I have 380 some videos up there now. I've been publishing 3 per week for almost 3 years, and so there's a whole lot of content here of varying levels. So no matter what skill level you are, I think there's probably something else you'll find here that's interesting. So check a few out, come back and you know, subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you. The other thing is, visit the video description down below. There's some important links. You can get yourself that ebook I mentioned earlier, and there's a link to that. If you're interested in getting one of those nice design idea books, those are available in my merch store. There's a link to that. And there's a link to my Patreon there too. So check that out if you're interested in that community. Alright, well thanks for watching the video. Take care. Happy silversmithing.